This is our team, and you 3 out of the 4 are here. So Lisa, she's sitting quietly back there in her office, and she is the statewide coordinator of the Pesticide Safety Education Program. And then to the right of my picture, you have Sarah, who has been telling us about all the technical support information that we'll need to make today a success. And Katrina's on vacation, so yay for her. And I will be your presenter for today. So thank you everybody, the whole team, for being here today. So if you signed up for Top 10 Use Pesticide Violations, you're in the right place. We're gonna get started right now. And I'm a community educator, and I've been with the program for about 7 years, not in this specific position, but I have come to enjoy being a community educator. Sarah indicated that we were going to be talking about the top 10 violations in 2018. When we first put together this presentation, we didn't have the list of 2019 violations, and guess what? They were now available, and we've combined them both. We're going to be comparing what were some of the violations in 2018, what happened in 2019. We're going to talk about the corresponding regulations that were violated and what you can do to ensure that you will be in compliance. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to be referencing online webinars or trainings which you can view on your own to reinforce or go into more detail on the specific topic. So let's get started. We're going to start with the 10th violation on the list. We're going to start from 10 and work our way up to the most popular violation, if you will. Labeling available at the use site. So here we have examples of the most common violations, which were not having a relevant SLN or special local needs labeling at the site when mixing or loading or applying, or not having the labeling booklet on site when mixing, loading, or applying. So why would it be important to have that information? Well, first of all, it's not only because it is in the regulation and it's required, but it has all the important, the label contains all the important information about safety, emergency procedures, PPE, and so it's a good idea to have it there in case of an emergency, right? So the regulation actually specifically indicates that for each pesticide application, you must have a copy of the registered labeling at the use site covering that specific use. And if you are using the product according to an SLN, you need to have the supplemental labeling as well, okay? Our main message today and in any pesticide safety training will be that the label is the law. We all hopefully are aware of the fact that the label is a federal document, the label is the law, and we in California have to abide by what is on the label. And we'll see that in California we're also special because the Department of Pesticide Regulation has added additional requirements which are not included on the label, and you need to know what they are, okay? We are going to do poll number 2, launch poll number 2. The proper handler decontamination supplies for hand washing are wet towelettes, or soap, water, disposable towels, or hand sanitizer. You can choose as many as you want. I'm gonna make this easy for you. Okay, it looks like everybody has responded, and it looks like, woo, we've got almost everyone got it right. Soap, water, disposable towels. According to regulation, you wet towelettes, hand sanitizers are not the proper way to decontaminate, okay? And so this particular violation, the violation of Code Section 6734, the most common ones in 2019 were handlers using wet towelettes in place of soap and single-use towels, or not having a decontamination site at the mixing and loading site within 1/4 of a mile from other handlers. So let's talk first about the requirement of soap, single-use towels, and water. It's actually written specifically in the regulation that in order to properly decontaminate, you have to have soap, water, and towels. Okay, in 2018, that was actually also a violation. So not much has changed, which is kind of surprising because it is a rather easy procedure or protocol to implement. Okay. So what else does the regulation say? It specifically states that you need to have a decontamination site or the water, soap, and disposable towels 1/4 of a mile from the handlers. It specifically says you need to have soap, water, disposable towels, and 3 gallons of water per handler as measured at the beginning of the workday. The regulation also specifically states that you need an extra pair of clean overalls. And if the label specifically requires protective eyewear, handlers need to carry with them 1 pint of eye wash, and that is just to get them from where they are out in the field to the decontamination site and continue the decontamination, cleaning out, washing their eyes. Okay, and there are other very specific requirements stated in that. So I just want to draw your attention to the fact that hand sanitizers and wet towelettes do not meet this regulation, the requirement of this regulation. Okay, it must be water, soap, and disposable towels. All right, we're gonna do launch poll number 3. Thank you. True or false? A grower must inform employees of the location of the pesticide use records before they enter the treated fields. The answer is true. A grower must inform employees of the location of the pesticide records before they enter a treated field. So what exactly is a treated field? You know what? I'm going to wait with that item, that specific definition. What I want to talk about right now is, who are we talking about? Who do you inform? It's the hazard communication for field workers. So field workers, before they go into a field, I apologize. I leave it on just in case someone is having difficulties getting onto the webinar, but everyone's here. Okay. So field workers, before they go into a treated field, they have to be notified of certain information. Okay, so some of the common violations were not updating the medical information within 24 hours of the change, or the growers not informing the employees of the location of the pesticide use records before they entered the field. Guess what? This violation hasn't changed from 2018 or 2019. So something's got to change, okay? If you are familiar with the A9, the Pesticide Safety Information Series, A9 is specific to farm workers. And on this form, it has blanks and it says emergency medical care. These blanks must be filled in, and you cannot put 911. Just call 911 if you're having an issue. That is not compliant. It has to have a specific clinic or doctor name, address, and telephone number. In many instances, when employers are training their field workers, they may do a drive along or ride along so that they show their employees exactly where the clinic or the hospital or the doctor's office is located. Those are very important details in the moment that someone has been exposed to pesticides, because time is of the essence, okay? So if that location, the medical information changes, you have to change it within 24 hours, okay? And also on the A9, there is I think it's on the second page, where it says specifically, you can find the pesticide use records here. And it has to be a detailed information in the office, in the red cabinet, not just look for them at the main office. As specific as you can be to ensure that your employees, your workers can find the information. They have the right to look at that information and without impediment. So if they don't speak the language, the information has to be available in their language, or someone has to translate it for them. So, okay. Any questions about that? Please put them in the Q&A or chat. Okay. That's good. I like to make sure that if you're a grower, you tell your employees. If you work for an FLC, ask the grower, ask to know where that information is so that you can inform your employees. It is very, very important, okay? So our next violation is regarding handler training. And this one actually in 2018 was in position number 10. And now it has moved up to violation number 7. So back in 2018, it was, the violations were, let's see, not updating the employee training before each new pesticide is handled, or not providing employee handler training before they work on or repair equipment previously used to apply pesticides. So in 2019, we still have the same violation. The employer is not including all the pesticides to be handled in the training. Very important. You have your handler annual training and you have your list of pesticides, but you're not going to be using all those pesticides right after your training. So it's important to ensure that you're retraining, refreshing the information, but also if any of the pesticides you're adding or changing them, that they are included, okay? And you have to maintain the records for 2 years. That is the magic number, for 2 years. Okay. So what are some of the other record keeping requirements? We already mentioned you have to keep the training records for 2 years, and on the right you'll see all the information that is required of your record keeping, okay? And in California, there are additional California requirements for pesticide handlers. You need a written training program. And again, every new pesticide. I myself, I believe that the regulation used to say every new group of pesticides, but that has now changed to every new pesticide. So that is very, very important to remember. Okay.
Hey, Maria, we have a question in the Q&A.
Okay. So if they have multi-locations, they need one for each location. And you are referring to this one, the A9. I'm gonna make the assumption that you are referring to that. And yes, it is very important to have an A9 at the requirement says that you have to have one in the main location where people congregate before they start their day. But if they're moving around, that means that the medical location might also move. Well, it's not too much to ask that a new A9 gets filled out and it travels with the group of people. So to that specific field, some growers have actually implemented putting like a mailbox or a box, and that's where they keep the specific information for that field. So do you need to have one? I would say yes, because should there be an emergency, you want that information to be readily available. Did you want to add anything, Lisa?
No, I agree with Maria. If you have workers that are at multiple locations, then and if that means that the emergency medical information is going to change, then you need information relevant to every single site where they're working. And as Maria said, you know, if you're an FLC, you need to ask the grower if you're not certain the actual medical facility that is closest and that they contract with, or, you know, that they've already had this relationship with to send employees there. So yes, you will be faced with the situation to have multiple A9s filled out. Same with handlers, like the A8 or the N8, that the answer is the same for that as well. You have to fill out the medical information for them for every additional site that they're going to be at, if the medical information changes.
Okay. Did that answer your question? Okay. So, so going back to the handler training, so let's see, what I wanted to say before we move on regarding this is that we all have to make sure that we're in agreement with the definition of a handler, okay? Because as we see, as I mentioned before, in 2018, the violation was not providing handler training to an employee who worked on or repaired equipment previously used to apply pesticides. That person, if that's the work that they're going to be performing, by the definition at DPR, they're considered a handler. So a handler is somebody who applies, who mixes, who loads pesticides, and who also works on equipment or is a mechanic, someone, okay? So I hope that the definition of handler is very clear. Before they do any of that work, they must have been trained properly, okay? So next, application-specific information for field workers. Again, this violation, in 2019, it was in position number 9, so it looks like things were going well, and now it has moved up the list. So it is a violation that is occurring more frequently, and it's not retaining the records. And again, the magic number is 2 years. Retain the records for 2 years because workers have the right to ask and to know what has been applied at each specific location. Okay, and so now we can talk about a treated field, because one of the violations under this code, under this regulation, is removing the information before the field was no longer considered a treated field. So what is a treated field? According to DPR, the definition is, let me go over here so I can give you the specific definition. It is a field in which an REI was in effect within the last 30 days, okay? So, and that at that point, field workers are allowed to go in after being trained. So any questions about the definition of a treated field? Because that can get kind of confusing sometimes. Okay. And here we go again with the A9. This A9 contains all that specific information that is required that we give to our employees so that they are well informed. And on this sheet, the A9, you also have to specifically indicate the location of the specific application-specific information. Okay?
Hey, Maria, we have another question in the chat.
Okay.
They're asking, can you expand on written program? So I believe it's in reference to the last slide.
Training. Yeah. Okay. Can I send you some? I will make sure that we get information when we send out the verification of attendance. We will also include, so basically the written program, it's a format, a sheet, and there isn't a specific form that you have to follow in order to specify that you have, you can check off all of the training topics that are required to ensure that you have covered all your bases. And it's the sheet that everyone has, every handler that you've trained has to sign. And so it wasn't part of the presentation because it wasn't specifically related to the violations, but I can send you some additional information. And when I say you, I mean everybody on the presentation regarding the written program, okay? Where you can find information about that. Moving right along, we are now in violation, oh no, poll number 4, service container labeling. California code requires the company name and mailing address, pesticide name, signal word to be included on the service container label. True or false? I mix Spanish and English, true and falso. So when you're using a service container, and there's you put a label on it, what information is required by the state of California to be included? Is it the company name, mailing address, pesticide name, signal word? Yes or no? All right. We did really well. You did really well, I should say. Yes, it's true. These items, this information, company name and the address, pesticide name and signal word must be on the service container label. What exactly is a service container? Can somebody go ahead and answer in the chat? What is a service container? Is it the jug in which the you purchase the product? No. Anything that holds pesticide aside from the original container? Yes, bingo. So a service container is a container other than the one in which it was purchased in, the one that it came in, that you use for transporting or storing, okay? So it's also not the mixed tank where you mix the products, because that is your mixed tank, okay? So the violation was basically not including the signal word on the service container, and also not including the address or the company name of the person responsible on the label. Here is in red, you have the information that is required by the code to be on the label. We recommend that you also include the EPA registration number, the most important piece of information should there be an emergency and you're contacting emergency personnel. They can quickly figure out exactly the product that you're referring to, and it would be very helpful, okay? And then the cell number. Yeah, it's easier to contact somebody these days via cell number instead of mailing a letter and saying, hey, I found your container somewhere. So the red lettering is the specific information that is required to be on the label, and we recommend you include this information, okay? And this one, actually, when I say this one, this violation was also on the list on 2018, and it hasn't changed. So if there's any way that we can reiterate and ensure that you are compliant, maybe we'll see this one not included in the 2020 violations. Okay. That's our goal, basically, right? We want everybody to be safe. All right. So medical emergency care requirements. This was violation number 4 in 2019. In 2018, it was at 3, so it just moved 1 spot. And the most common, and let me see. Actually, the common violations in 2019 are identical to the ones in 2018. Not taking employees suspected of pesticide illness to the doctor immediately. I actually should have capitalized the word immediately because it's better to be safe than sorry. If you suspect that somebody was exposed to pesticides, take them to the emergency, to the doctor immediately, okay? And not having the SDS of the product readily available to provide to medical personnel. Code actually says that you have to have the SDS available and the product name, the EPA registration name, number, and the active ingredient. Plus the circumstances of application or how the accident or how the exposure occurred. Okay, so that's the information that you need to have readily available in case of an emergency. And we have here the A8. Lisa mentioned earlier, we were talking about the A9 for field workers. We have the A8 for handlers. Again, here you have the emergency medical care information that you need to include in the blanks, and you cannot say 911. It has to be a specific address, name, and phone number. And also in that documentation, there is a spot where you have to indicate where the SDSs are available. Okay. This is quite a different violation. It's pest control related, and it was on the list in 2018. It was on the list in 2019, and it's the same violation. Basically, if you're a pest control company, and you're working in multiple counties, you have to register, and you have to contact your agriculture commissioner's office and register with them so that they know that you are practicing in their county. Because I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but I just wanted to make sure that you know it's on there. And all right, we are now going to pull number 5. Thank you. In California, most pesticide handlers have to wear a minimum of what PPE? Multiple choice, different items available. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so in California, pesticide handlers, okay, have to wear a minimum, are required to wear a minimum of long sleeve shirt, closed-toed shoes, socks, long pants, protective eyewear, and chemical resistant gloves. Now, this is going to take us back to the topic of conversation we had at the very beginning, where I talked about the label being the law. Oh, you pesky little thing. Yeah. The label being the law. The label is a federal document. And in California, we're extra special, and we've added additional requirements. So maybe the the label does not include everything that you need, but in California, as a minimum, a handler needs to have protective eyewear, chemical resistant gloves, the closed-toe shoes, socks, long pants, long sleeve shirt, okay? So this particular violation was number 2, 2018, number 2, 2019. And this past year, it was not using PPE correctly or for its intended purpose. The intended purpose of PPE is to protect you from pesticide exposure, right? If this gentleman decides he is going to zip it down and tie it at his waist, it is no longer protecting him the way it's intended to, okay? If he decides to prop those goggles up to the top of his head, you are wearing it, but you're not wearing it properly for its intended purpose. So it is there for a reason. It's required for a reason, okay? Using damaged and contaminated PPE, okay? The employer is responsible for providing the PPE that is required for the job that a handler is going to perform. And the employee, the handler, is required to maintain it, to clean it, and to store it properly, and to check to see whether or not it's damaged, okay? In 2018, one of the violations was storing the PPE in the same place as pesticides. You don't. You have to store them separately, okay? And the other violation in 2018 was the employer not providing the proper PPE required by the labeling, okay? So I see that there is a question. Aren't long sleeve shirts, pants, shoes, and socks a label required? So the question is, aren't long sleeve shirts, pants, shoes, and socks a label requirement and not a California requirement? I'm not sure if we're trying, like, why the distinction? The label may say wear long sleeve shirts, pants, shoes, socks, and this and that. That's a federal requirement because it's the label, right? And in California, we add the protective eyewear and the chemical resistant gloves. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so you have to follow the label requirements.
Yeah.
But sometimes the label requirements fall short of the California requirements. So in California, you're never not wearing, at a minimum, long sleeve shirt, long pants, the socks, closed-toed shoes. That's the federal minimum. We happen to add protective eyewear, chemical resistant gloves for most handling tasks, and in some cases also coveralls. Mm-hmm. So you got to still follow the label. Maria, there's kind of a follow-up question here from Melissa, mm-hmm, asking us to provide a link to the California additional label. So just to be clear, you're following the federal label. So California does register pesticides, you know, like EPA registers pesticides, and of those, some of those pesticides are also registered in California, but we use the federal label, okay? So, because California doesn't have the authority to just register pesticides that haven't already been registered by EPA. So we use the federal label. Most of the additional requirements you're going to find in the regulation. So we've been linking the regulations in the text, in the chat. So it's like you need to read the label, but you also need to know what's in the California Code of Regulation. So does that answer your question? I can link to you where we look for labels, and you can verify there, or you can check there if they're registered in California, and that's very important. But there's not typically a California specific label, particularly when the change is additional PPE requirements.
And that's why this is one of the more common, I'm thinking this is one of the more common violations, because the label is it's a federal document which we must follow, like Lisa said. And in California, they don't change the labels. We take that label, you read it, you have to follow that, and you just have to know what additional requirements California has implemented. You just have to know. And that's why we're here today, because it's not always that obvious. And that's why we offer trainings. And there was a comment in the Q&A that California is stricter. Yes, we're stricter. I didn't include the image here, but in most of our trainings, when we talk about the labels and the differences between federal regulations and California regulations, we talk about a cake. There are different layers. In California, you have the bottom layer is the federal requirements, then you have the California requirements, and in your counties, you might have additional requirements, so that it forms a layered cake, and we're just special because we love cake. So you can call it stricter, we are. We also love our people more, and we want you to be safe, and you just have to know that there are additional requirements. Okay, if you have any more questions, go ahead, put them in the chat, and I hope that helped to clarify. Okay, so let's see. So that was the next topic. What if the label doesn't require gloves? So we already kind of touched upon it, because the label is a federal document. Maybe at the federal level, that particular product doesn't require gloves. Well, guess what? California, we're special, we're stricter, we love our cake. You are required to wear gloves, and not just any gloves. They have to be chemical resistant gloves. So one of the items, the multiple choice items on the poll, was waterproof gloves. That is not sufficient in California. DPR provides a plastic glove card, and on one side it has the list of all of the material types for gloves that meet the requirements in California. So that is something that we can send you a link for the DPR glove card, and those cards are actually available in English and in Spanish. So here we have the same type of conversation about eye protection. If the label does not require eye protection in California, we do require it. And very specific requirements. It has to be plus Z87, it's Z87 plus designated, and C designated, so that meets the requirement for protective eyewear. Okay, so again, why do you want to use PPE? Well, there was a study done a few years back, and this gentleman is handling a pesticide. He is applying a pesticide right off the bat, because we know we're in California. He should be wearing gloves and eyewear. He's got the long pants, his shoes, I'm sure he has socks on, and the long sleeves, which are rolled up, but he is in violation, okay, clearly. And the 56%, it refers to the pesticide illnesses that were reported. 56% were due to not wearing protective eyewear, okay? Completely preventable, right? Completely preventable. And then 28% of the illnesses that were reported were due to lack of not wearing gloves. And 33% of all handler pesticide illnesses were due to failure of wearing PPE. So this is why you wear it. It's got its purpose, is you're supposed to wear it properly, and it will protect you, okay? So now we've come to violation number 1. Violation number 1 is labeling and permit conditions compliance. You have to follow the law. I guess we've already basically covered a lot of the topic and what it means to follow the label. Okay, the label again is a federal document. We follow federal law, and in California, we've added additional requirements. Every single label will come with the wording that says it is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. Okay, so what are some of the common violations? The first one was not following the application requirements listed on the pesticide product label. So that means that it'll give you specific use applications, where you can use it, how you can use it, and also the rates. Can you use a rate higher than listed in the label? Quick, yes or no in the chat. Can you use a rate higher than is indicated in the label? Thank you. No, you cannot. Awesome. I love it. Capital N-O, exclamation point. No. Can you use less than what is on the label, the use rate? The answer is yes, you are still in compliance. You're not breaking the law. However, we don't really recommend that because then you might get into issues of resistance. So you can, but it's not always recommended. Okay? And the other violation was applying a pesticide to a site or crop not listed on the pesticide product label. Again, if that particular site or crop is not on there, you cannot use it on that site. So let's say you have an orchard of almonds and you have a product that only says you can use it on walnuts. You cannot use that product in your almond orchard if almonds are not listed on the label. Okay? This is why it's so important to read your label before you, or read the label on the product before you buy it. Because you may come back to your field, to your orchard, and you're not going to be able to use it. Okay? So some of the violations in 2018 that I also would like to address to ensure that they don't happen is that the pesticide storage requirements were not followed. Again, the label contains a wealth of information for your safety and also so that it performs its function properly. It is very important to read it thoroughly, understand it, know the different sections of the label, and if your handler doesn't read English, then someone should read it to them and explain it, because we have yet to find any product labels that are in Spanish. Almost all the labels will be in English. We did do a label reading webinar a couple months ago, and we will be repeating that webinar in December, I believe. It's available online, and we will be sending you that link on the YouTube channel. So if you'd like to reference it or review it now, highly recommend it. And so one additional thing that I would like to mention, and it comes to mind because of everything that's going on right now. We have this situation where there's this new virus, but let's bring it down to pesticides and ag. If there is a new pest that acts and behaves similarly to something that is on the label. So let me be more clear. This particular label, I don't know if you can read it, but it actually does have almonds, and it has here powdery mildew, and it gives you the rate and actually very specific time of the year that you can apply it. Well, let's say that there is this new pest that appears in almonds and it behaves similarly to powdery mildew. you actually would be able to, you can use this product on your almonds, okay? You can't use it on a different crop if it's not on the label, but should there be a pest that behaves similarly to something that's already on there and the crop, your site is on the label, you can use it. Do a little bit of research and make sure that it will work for what you would like to use it, and that is allowed. So I can say it again. Oh, here's the cake. I can say it again. The label is the law, but it's just half of the story. Because again, in California, we are super special. We love our people. We're going to protect you. So we've added additional requirements. The first layer of the cake is the federal law. Then you have state law, and your ag commissioner may have added additional requirements. And it is important that if you work in different counties, you check in and make sure that you're in compliance with any different regulations or requirements. I have a question here, and it says, how often do handler trainings need to take place? The training needs to take place every year. It's an annual training. And that's the same thing with the field worker training. And it's not specifically a calendar year, but it's 12 months. So if your employees were trained in June of one particular year, then they have to be retrained again the following June. Okay. Here we've listed some resources for you. And again, there's a wealth of links and resources that have been added for you in the chat. And all of that information we are going to include in an email when we communicate with you in a week with information on your verification of attendance. Okay? That's my contact information. Thank you for being here today,